Podcast.
All right, quick story for you before we get going. I am in Nashville, Tennessee, Music City, USA. Had an interesting Lyft experience this morning. Lyft being the car share service. I needed to go somewhere, didn't want to park, called a Lyft. A woman picks me up. She's very nice. I'm a chatty guy. This is why I'm so great at podcasting and radio. So I'm getting to know her, and she's telling me about moving to Nashville. She said, I moved here for music. I said, oh yeah. She said, do you remember this album? And it was an album that came out a couple of years ago. It won a Grammy. I said, you know, it's funny. I tried to get those guys on my radio show. I reached out to them, wasn't able to do it. She tells me, I engineered that album. So you're kidding me. No, I didn't say that because it's expected. This is one of those things that happens all the time. You never know who you're going to meet. This is a reason for you to have conversations with people. 9 times out of 10, maybe 99 times out of 100, nothing is going to come from them, at least not right away. This one, I said, hey, you know, maybe we should talk. This is the reality of music, the reality of podcasting. Sometimes you can have success. Maybe it's not monetary success. You end up driving for Lyft. Maybe it's not the listener success that you want. Nobody knows what you've got, even though it's really good. We're going to get into this. It's Build a Big Podcast, the marketing podcast for podcasters. My name is David Hooper, bigpodcast.com. That is the website. By the way, quick note, I am doing all episodes this month a little bit differently. I'm doing, we'll call them a lo-fi, low-budget version of the standard episodes that I do. I'm talking into a $99 mic. It is a Shure SM58. I'm going into a $59 interface, the Focusrite Vocaster 1. A lot of people come to me, they say, I'd love to have a podcast, but I can't afford it, don't have any money. You don't need much money. I'm going into Adobe Audition for this one, which is $35 a month if you pay by the month, $22 a month if you pay by the year. But you could use Audacity for free. So you've got a studio, you know, $158. Not bad. You know, $158, free software. You can do this, man. Anyway, let's get into it. This is the audio edition of my weekly newsletter. That is called Big Podcast Insider. You can find it at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This issue, number 210, and this is what we're going to cover. We need to talk about Twitter. Build your Blue Sky audience. Steal this email template to ask for reviews. Free tool to schedule multi-person episodes. The 3-step writing framework to become a better podcaster. A podcaster, a Christian, and a guy who does CrossFit. You can see where that was going. Also, classified ads, things will help you grow your podcast, get more people to your podcast, make more money as a podcaster. This episode of Build a Big Podcast brought to you by Riverside.fm. You want to sound good? We're talking about low-cost tools. Riverside is a one-stop shop to make you sound great in your remote interviews. You're going to sound like you're in the same room, no matter where your guest or your co-host are in the world. That's because Riverside has something we call a double ender in the business. It records locally on your computer, on their computers. It's going to sound like you're in the same room. People won't even know unless you let them know. And this setup that I'm talking about, $160 or so, that's going to work with Riverside great. You've got one mic, one interface for yourself. The person on your other end, your co-host, your guest, they can use that same type of interface. Boom. You're sounding like you've got a big-time radio show, a big-time podcast. You're going to love how easy it is to set up and how great you sound. You can edit via text. That's going to make taking out the chit chat at the very beginning of the episode, some of the stuff at the end maybe that you don't want to release, big chunks of audio that you think, it didn't really work for this episode. Taking that away, making those fine edits that you do in your DAW that much quicker and easier. Also, social media clips. They got something we call Magic Clips. It listens to your long form podcast. It knows what's interesting, what people are going to like, chops them up automatically for you. Upload those clips to your social media, bring people to your full episode. It is a very good tool. Like I said, all in one, a lot of stuff, not just recording, not just editing, but also your marketing. I want you to try it out for free. You can do this at riverside.fm. They're going to give you a couple of hours. Look under the hood, kick the tires, do an interview, do 2 interviews, see how you like it. I think you will. And I think you're going to want to stick around. If you do, I've got a discount code for you. That's Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. That's going to get you 15% off. That's Riverside.fm, the discount code, Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. All right, we're going from thing to thing to thing on this episode. All of them about podcasting, all of them about growing your podcast, making money with your podcast, making a podcast that people care about and that people will miss should your podcast go away. When I go from one thing to another thing, you're going to hear this sound. When you hear that sound, if you want more information on what I was talking about, go to newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Again, this is issue number 210. Let's go. We need to talk about Twitter. Lots of people are saying that Twitter is dead. It is not. I want you to think about this. Even a legitimately dead site, MySpace, still getting a ton of traffic. Friendster, still getting a ton of traffic. You might have seen something, maybe at your local state fair, maybe at the local club, a band who had one hit in the 70s, one hit in the 80s, maybe a couple hits. Still touring, still making a living. That happens. Sometimes people are so big, a song is so big, a website is so big, even though it's legitimately dead, it still gets a lot of traffic. Twitter is not there yet, but Twitter is changing. Everything changes, especially in podcasting, the way we record, the way people listen to our episodes, the way we schedule guests. I've been talking about the way I'm recording this episode. A $99 mic, a $59 interface. Everything is digital. Back in the day, tape recorder, literally a tape recorder, magnetic reel-to-reel tape. That was hundreds and hundreds of dollars, maybe over $1,000 just for a baseline recorder. The tape itself, not cheap. What we called a China marker or a grease pencil, writes on China. You'd mark up your tape like that, use a razor blade. You'd have to have tape, the sticky kind, to tape your magnetic tape together. That was expensive. Now, super cheap. Change is good a lot of the time. And that is what has happened with Twitter. Communities like the one that was on Twitter can collapse very quickly. They change, they morph. It's like gentrification in a neighborhood. Is it good? Is it bad? It's a little bit of both probably. But the people who were in a gentrified neighborhood before it was gentrified, when they leave, they split up. And that is what has happened to Twitter. A lot of people on Bluesky. We're going to talk about that in a minute. I want you to think about it like this, though. The same thing can happen to the community around your podcast. One day you're hot. The next, you could set yourself on fire and nobody would care. I didn't put this in the newsletter, but I'm going to tell you the real phrase behind that. The real phrase, when you're having a down moment in the entertainment industry or podcast, and you can say, I could set myself on fire and nobody would on me. Been there? If you haven't, you will be if you stick around long enough. That's just how it works. If you have a career in the entertainment business, and I'm talking about years and years, decades, sometimes you're hot, sometimes you're not. There's no set it and forget it in entertainment. There's no set it and forget it in podcasting. If you are not changing alongside your listeners, they are going to find somewhere else to go. This is one of the reasons that I recommend somebody continuing to publish during the holiday. Now, look, if you need a break, take that break. But you have listeners that are lonely during the holiday, that are frustrated. They just need a break from their family, maybe. And if you're not there for them to listen to, they're going to find somewhere else. Will they come back to you? Yeah, probably, but maybe not. That's what's happening with Twitter now. Twitter got a little weird. The moment there was a place for people to go, Bluesky, again, we're going to talk about it in a minute, people did go. So don't get complacent. Keep moving forward with your hosting skills, your content, the way you market yourself, keep releasing episodes, and keep exploring new ways for people who are listening to you now to keep in touch with you, and for people who don't yet know about you to find out about you. By the way, if you need help on this, I've got something called Big Podcast AMP. Let's get into it. Big Podcast AMP. AMP stands for Audio Monetization Program. It's a personal coaching program. It's me working with you to help you do three things. One, grow your podcast audience. Two, get people talking about your podcast. Three, make more money with your podcast and also your podcasting skills. I've got details at bigpodcast.com/amp. That's bigpodcast.com/AMP. You've got a new year starting up. Why not kick it off the right way? The year is going to pass anyway. We can be having this conversation a year from now, and you've had the success that you want in podcasting, or maybe not. It go like this past year where, you're doing all right. Hey, good for showing up, good for listening to this podcast, but could you do more? Yes. I want to work with you one-on-one to do that. Bigpodcast.com/amp. That's bigpodcast.com/AMP. Let's get into Bluesky. Talk about building your Bluesky audience. Bluesky is hot. Will it be hot in the future? I don't know, but it is hot right now. So now is the time for you to jump in and grow your podcast audience there. There's something called Bluesky Roast. I've got it linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 210. It is a fun site. It will help you to grow your audience on Bluesky. It will analyze your Bluesky profile. It will give you a gentle roasting. And I mean that in a fun way, like a comedic roast. It's a fun way to start a conversation about Bluesky with people who are listening to you, what you're doing there, and get them over there to see you. I've got a link of what it said about me. If you're interested in that, you can see it at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue 210. Here's a quote from it. A cocktail of sarcasm, southern charm, and mean-laden wisdom served straight up. Sounds like I'm a drag queen. Like a Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil style person, you know? Side note, there's a new series on Netflix. It's called Kings of Tupelo. I used to live in Mississippi, and it gives that quirkiness of a small town in the South. Yeah, maybe I've got a little of that. Probably not to that level, though. Here's what else it said. Crafting a unique space among hot takes and podcasting insights, David's humor is as unpredictable as his post engagement. Hey, it's a new site. Some stuff is hot, some stuff not so much. So it's roasting me on that. It says this. They call me a podcasting Yoda. Exactly those words. David is the podcasting Yoda, guiding lost souls like Luke through the galaxy of sound. If you want to see if you agree with that, I've got the link to my Bluesky profile at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. If you're on Bluesky, you want to discover your Bluesky persona yourself, I've got that link for you. Also at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. If you got questions, by the way, about this newsletter, about podcasting, if I can help you in any way, Bluesky is a great way to reach me. I'm not on Twitter anymore. It just wasn't working for me. Some things come, some things go. You got to ride with it, man. Take that wave when you can get it, ride it as far as you can. And when it's time to jump off the board, jump off and go somewhere else. I love the idea of Twitter. I think it was super powerful. I wrote about it in my books. Everybody's on Bluesky now, at least the people that I'm communicating to. Your results may vary. Do get on Bluesky, though, to try because your people might be there. I've got all the links, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Steal this email template to ask for reviews. I sent Seth Godin a letter. This was probably 15 years ago. It's what we call a dollar letter. And I've got a link to a very successful dollar letter at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. I had $1,000 attached to this one. Not exactly. I'd attached a receipt with a $1,000 payment to a related charity he was talking about. And I wanted to get his attention. So I said, hey, I just gave $1,000 to your charity. I will give you $5,000 more if you will give me 500 words for a book I'm working on. He sent something back and declined. He said, no, sorry, I can't do that. And here's why. He said, if I do the forward for your book, which I don't know that he's done this at all. I think he said that he just doesn't do them. And here's why he wouldn't do it for me. Because one, he didn't know me. But he said, if I do the forward for your book, I'm going to show up as forward by with a link to his name. And when you go to a Seth Godin book, and he sells a lot of books, the last decade, maybe the last 2 decades, the number one business book that there was. So I know a lot of people are looking for Seth Godin books. If they click on Seth Godin, they're going to also see my book because he has done the forward for my book. And frankly, that's exactly why I wanted him to do the forward for my book. I knew that was going to happen. He was on to me. He said, no, I can't do that. But in addition to that, he did send me a nice letter. I did interview Seth Godin one time at the backstage of the CMA, Country Music Association Awards. And that was great. He was there doing a keynote and one-on-one with him. I mean, it was incredible. I've done some other stuff with him too. And he's very smart. He told me at that interview, I still remember this, and the letter was very similar. He said, you're one of the few guys that gets this. I was like, oh, thanks. Maybe he tells that to everybody, but it meant something to me. And I do get it. That's why I've done this kind of work for the last 25 years. That's how I was able to get a response from him, have a relationship with him. I mean, he's commented on the blog before. Like I said, I sat backstage with him. I mean, I wouldn't say I know the guy. Showbiz know the guy. And he would remember the interactions that we have. If you want to do something similar like that, that gets attention and gets you in with somebody that you want to review you, I've got an email template. It is linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. It's a similar concept. It will work for you to get reviews of your podcast. Are reviews of your podcast helpful? Kind of. They're nice for social proof. It's more of an ego stroke than anything else. I don't think reviews will make or break your podcast, but they are nice to have. It is easy to get them. This is a template that will help you do that. If you want it, go to newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is episode number 210. Free podcast scheduling tool. This is a free tool to help you schedule multi-person episodes. It is one thing if you are doing an interview one-on-one with somebody. It is one thing if you have a co-host and there's only one other person that you need on this session with you when you're recording. But when you get 3 people, 4 people, maybe a company person, a producer, an engineer, it helps to have a scheduling tool so you can find out when these multiple people can be at the same place, your session, at the same time. Here's how it works. You create a poll. You said, here are 5 times when I can do this session. Put them in order from best to worst. Let me know which of these times work for you. Send this to your co-host, guest, producer, engineer, company person. It's ranked choice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here are the times when I can make it. These times are better than others. Here are the times when I can't make it. It automatically collects the responses. It finalizes the best time for everybody. Is it perfect? No, but it's better than you going back and forth. It is free. I have it linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 210. A 3-step writing framework to become a better podcaster. I've got a long video linked. Yeah, you know where. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com, episode 210. It's about an hour. I don't want you to watch it. Well, you could watch it. I'm going to summarize it for you now so you don't have to. I went through it myself. I've got some highlights. I've transposed this writing framework for podcasters. This is going to help you make a better podcast. Why writing matters. You may not consider what you do with your podcast to be writing, but planning and outlining your episode is the same thing. When you're planning and outlining your episode, when you're writing, you have an opportunity to think about what you're doing. One, you're thinking about persuasion. Words are a powerful tool for persuasion. Your podcast is a powerful tool for persuasion. It allows you to communicate ideas clearly and effectively to a wide audience. When I'm outlining an episode, let's take this episode, for example. I'm working from bullet points. In this case, I'm also working from the newsletter that's published at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. I've got everything written out, but sometimes when it comes out of my mouth, it's like, it's not really working. I've got to recut that line, recut that paragraph maybe, audibly. I don't go back there and rewrite it, but I do deliver it in a different way. Cut the first part out. Good podcasts are made. Great podcasts are remade. That's what an edit is. It's a remake. Second thing it's going to let you do, clarity of thought, writing or planning and outlining in this case. It forces clarity of thinking. The process of writing will help you to clarify your thoughts and generate new ideas, leading to better problem solving. I found this when I've done the voiceover, the audiobook version of the books I've written. Again, sometimes writing something down is different than actually voicing it. So I sort of retool things. Oh man, I wish I could go back and rewrite something. And sometimes I have. I actually do something a lot differently now than I did when I was first writing books. I used to put out a book and it would take me a minute to do the audiobook. I wasn't really worried about audio. Now that I've gotten better at voicing audio, better at editing, better at getting audiobooks out, I feel more comfortable getting everything out at the same time. And I found that having that very specific read where I'm paying attention to the text, where I'm really paying attention to what I've written, thinking about the ideas in a different way, that has been extremely helpful. This is what I'm calling clarity of thought. So if you are writing and redoing things in a recording or redoing things in your writing, that's huge. That's huge. And that's going to make the ideas that you spread via your podcast or anywhere so much better. Third thing is idea generation. Writing or planning or outlining. It's not just about communication. It's also generating new ideas. So if you get in here, write things down, outline it, work from bullet points, whatever you do to plan for your episode, that's going to get you other episodes in the future. This is very similar to when I do an interview. I don't have to have the whole interview laid out. At this point, maybe 2 or 3 good questions. I've got an idea of where the interview can go. But once I get into an interview, you don't know what that guest is going to say. And you can play off that guest to finish out the interview if you have an idea of where you want to go. Same thing for your idea generation. If I've got 4 or 5 podcast ideas, while making those 4 or 5 podcasts, there are going to be spinoffs that lead to other spinoffs that lead to other spinoffs. So if you pay attention, as you're going through these things, persuasion, clarity of thought, this third one, idea generation, you are going to be set. You're going to be persuasive. So whatever you're talking about gets action from the people who are listening, changes hearts, changes minds, basically gets them to do something, whatever that is. You're going to have clarity of thought where that message is super clear, where you don't have to over-explain something, use extra words, put in a bunch of filler that doesn't work for people. And then the additional ideas where you're going to be able to keep going and going and going and going and going. It's a flywheel, man. You start 4 or 5 good ideas, that's going to expand. It's almost like a multi-level marketing chart, if that really worked. But this does. If they tell 2 friends and they tell 2 friends and they tell 2 friends, before you know it, the whole world's covered. Same deal with ideas. You have an unlimited supply of ideas if you can just get those first 4 or 5 ideas going. Related to this, there's some tactics that will make you a better podcaster. One, start with the end in mind. Before you record an episode, just like I'm talking about those 2 or 3 questions maybe for your guest, start with the end in mind. During the planning of your episode, think about where you're going to start, kind of the meaty middle, where you want to spend most of your time, but think about how you want to wrap things up. Maybe it's a callback to what you had at the beginning. If you can do that, you're going to have a whole lot more flexibility in the middle because people remember how you started. They remember how you finish. And if part of how you finish calls back to how you started, that makes it extra powerful. So start with the end in mind. What is it that you want people to get out of this? Also, what is the big picture that you're hoping to get from a guest or hoping to deliver in your monologue? Second thing, copy others. I think it was Hunter S. Thompson that was doing this. I knew a copywriter named Gary Halbert. He would definitely do this. He would copy sales letters word for word. Really figure out what these guys were doing. Hunter S. Thompson, famous writer. I think it was Hemingway or somebody. I don't know. He was taking famous writers and copying them word for word, do the entire book. I've seen this done with songwriters. People try to figure out songs. And this is one of the things where we've got idea generation coming up. Let's say you're trying to copy a song. Well, you make a mistake as you're trying to figure it out. Ooh, that's an idea that I can use. So you're not plagiarizing, but in your quest to copy, you're coming up with something completely new. So copying others. Another thing he talks about, drafting and incubation. He says, allow draft to sit for a while before editing. This incubation period can lead to fresh insights and improvements in the final product. I 100% agree with this. Once you record your episode, the raw tape, let it sit, go back to it tomorrow. Maybe it's better than you thought. Maybe it's not as good as you thought. I've certainly had this with books. I never finish a book thinking, oh, this isn't that good. I think, oh man, this is the best. This is the best book I've ever done. I go back to it a week or 2 later, maybe for the edit, or I get on the audiobook and I'm like, it's not that good. And maybe it's old. I think it's arguably more accurate. When we're in the middle of something that's more important to us, we see all the minutia and we see the intricacies and we think, yeah, this is great. We are in the heat of the moment, understanding what went into it. So of course we're excited about it. Taking a break, it gives us a little more of a honest opinion of our own work, good and bad. So if you're beating yourself up, maybe you go back the next day, it's kind of tired. It probably isn't as bad as you think. Editing. I talk about this. Great episodes come from great editing. What this guy recommends, he says, separate drafting and editing phases to enhance quality. And this is very similar to what I talked about. Wait before you start editing. Put a little time and space in between those things. I mentioned doing the audiobook of the manuscript that I'd written. That's time and space. It's me delivering the content in a different way. Well, that helps things. If I had all the time in the world, I could go back, I could change the manuscript. This is another thing I'm just going to add. This is not on the list, but you've got to know when to release something. And I don't think that's ever really clear, but sometimes it's just done. It's not perfect. It's just done. The end, get it out. It's not going to help people if you never get it out. Perfect is the enemy of good. You've heard this? If it's never getting out, it's not going to help people. Also, perfect does not exist. He talks about using simple language. Clarity and simplicity are key. The words you use should be accessible, avoid jargon, and overly complex vocabulary. Some podcasters, more podcasters than radio people, I don't know why they think they've got to go into this DJ thing and use these big words, try to sound smart. And there's some very popular podcasters that do this. They are so in their heads. You're thinking, what are they talking about? Some people are fooled by that and they think, oh, this guy is so smart. Other people, not so much. You sound like some guy on the street ranting and raving some kind of crazy conspiracy theory. No. You want your message heard and you want your message understood. You want your message followed. You want to get people to take action. And because of that, you need to use simple language. Related to that, he talks about speaking like you talk. Use conversational language to connect with listeners on a personal level, making your episodes feel more relatable. This sounds obvious, but a lot of podcasters overlook this. Again, trying to be a radio announcer. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. For all the listeners out there, go to www.bigpodcast.com. I'm not talking to all the listeners. I'm talking to you. And if I were talking to you one-on-one, that's what I would say. You, James, Jay, Karen, go to bigpodcast.com. I wouldn't say, hey, everybody in the vicinity of me talking, go to www. No. Speak like you talk. I've got the full list. I call it the 3-step better podcaster framework. More details, more thoughts. The link to that 1-hour video at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 210. Podcaster, a Christian, and a guy who does CrossFit. All right, there are a million versions of this joke. And you probably met somebody like this. Somebody's found Jesus, can't stop talking about it. You may be that person. Same for people who do CrossFit. Oh my gosh. We know. Your latest WOD. That's a workout of the day when they type it out. WOD. Go to Bluesky. WOD. PR. Got to be a new PR for burpees, man. All right, good for you. We're that way with podcasting sometimes. To finish the joke, a podcaster, a Christian, and a guy who does CrossFit walk into a bar. I know because I was there and they all told me within 30 seconds. If you're not talking about your podcast, by the way, maybe step that up a little bit. If you're talking about it too much, find somebody other than your friends to talk to. Make something that people care about. Get a little bit more skillful about that. I got a funny meme about this. It's at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Again, if you want to work on this stuff and grow your audience, I can help you sneak those conversations in, get more people to your podcast, work with you on those things. It's called Big Podcast AMP, audio monetization program, and you can find it at bigpodcast.com/AMP, bigpodcast.com/AMP. Classified ads for you. Things will help you grow your podcast, get more people to your podcast, and make more money with your podcast. The things that this podcast is about. Book Like a Boss will automate guest booking for podcasters. Earlier, I talked about getting multiple people together. If you've just got one guest at a time, you want this one. Book Like a Boss. You type when you're available. Somebody that you want to interview picks from those times. Everything is set up in your calendar, in that person's calendar. Automated guest scheduling, automatic reminders to the guest. I'm talking text messages. They're not going to forget you. You're not going to forget them either. It integrates with all email and calendar software. So whether you're using Yahoo Calendar, remember that? iCal, Google Calendar, you're going to get set up. You're never going to miss an episode. You're never going to miss an interview. And your guest, I'm not going to say they'll never miss an interview. They're more unlikely to stand you up when you use something like Book Like a Boss. I've got a special deal for you. You can try it for free. It's at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. pCloud, lifetime backup storage. Maybe swap files back between you and a producer, you and a guest. Well, don't lose your hard work. Make it easy for people to download it, critique it, change it, edit it, spread it, whatever. I like to use it for a backup, but you can use it in any number of ways. I've got a link for you to get 10 gigabytes free. You'll find it at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Thank you for listening to Build a Big Podcast, the marketing podcast for podcasters. I want to help you grow your podcast, get more people to your podcast, make money with your podcast. I got some different ways to work with me. Of course, this podcast, the newsletter, always free. You can find everything that I do at bigpodcast.com. Go there. While you are there, subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you don't miss an episode. I've made it very easy for you. I've got a subscribe page. Some people call it a follow page. Regardless, go there if you need one for yourself. And you do. If you don't already have one, steal mine. Bigpodcast.com. That's where to find it. One click is all it takes. Get me on iPhone. Get me on Android. Get me wherever you get your podcast at bigpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. I'll see you on the next episode of Build a Big Podcast.